Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It is August 26th, just after 10:30 a.m. And this is the House Bill 3000 Task Force Subcommittee on Cannabinoids. And we'll start off, Amanda, if you'd be willing to do attendance.
Yep, definitely. So Representative Morgan.
I'm not here. I'm present by video.
Senator Hansel. I don't think I've seen him come in yet. Rob Bovet. Not seeing him. Courtney.
Courtney Moran, present by video. Thank you.
Matt. Not here yet. Jay.
Jay Noller, present by audio only.
Thank you. Amanda.
Amanda Metzler, present by video.
Brent.
Here by video.
Andre.
Present by video.
And then Steve Marks is going to be late, but he said he'd try to call in. And then looks like Matt is just able to join us as well.
And Jake Pelroy is here for Senator Hansel's office.
Oh, perfect.
Amanda,
right.
I'm here for ODA.
Okay, perfect. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are starting to move towards the portion of making recommendations back to the full committee on legislative changes and any changes of the state law that, as you see in the agenda that Amanda resent out, changes to state law to support the regulation of intoxicating cannabis-derived products and artificially derived cannabinoids. And this is continued from last meeting. And I'm not really sure, what portions of secondary market supply chain should be licensed. We've talked about this a lot, in that if there is licensing at all steps of the process, then there's accountability through it all as well. Is there anybody doing a presentation, Amanda, or are we simply going into discussion?
So today we just have the discussion. We did have a couple requests to give us presentations on GMP, but they came in yesterday and today, so it was a little late to add it to the agenda. So I think we'll have to have another meeting to have like a more in-depth conversation with the presentations.
Okay. Looking at the topic, I'm going to open up to the panel. So secondary product manufacturing, importing cannabinoid hemp from out of state, wholesale distribution of cannabinoid hemp in state, retail sales of cannabinoid hemp, in-state businesses, out-of-state businesses selling direct to in-state consumers. If anybody wants to take on that right now, we can. The other topic I would like to kind of address as well, though, that I realized we haven't really, I know we're going to bring it up at a later time, but it came up in the full meeting yesterday. When does the packaging size, when does the 0.3 THC, is it enough? And for when I have somebody says that, we know we want labeling correct, but if they ate the whole package, they're going to be in trouble, even though it says 0.3 THC. And so when do we have the discussion about serving sizes and how much consuming is okay still under that level? So Brent, go ahead.
Going over this a bunch of times, thought about it every which way. The easiest thing to do is do a per package as far as the limit. It's really simple. They can't have over that 0.03 in a whole package, and then there's no concern whether or not each gummy has a set amount. That way you get away from the weight of the food or the gummies. Stephen, you thinking about that?
Yeah, could I just ask a clarifying question? So setting the limit at 0.3% is versus setting it at the per package limit, those are kind of two separate options. If it's at 0.3%, then the package size is irrelevant. It's just 0.3% times the weight of that package, which gets to the an 80-gram bar of chocolate with 250 milligrams of THC issue, where setting a milligram limit at the package level allows for setting actual THC limits based on the milligrams and potential intoxicating effect. Which of those were you advocating
0.3
for?
per package. So 0.3 per package, it wouldn't matter how much candy's in there. It can't
So-
have the total amount of whatever's in that package can't exceed the amount of 0.3.
Is that 0.3% or 0.3 milligrams?
Milligrams, I think, right? That was I think that's what we were talking about. Yeah, not percent.
Is
Not supposed to be any in it, right? So whatever individual serving or whatever, pack of hemp smokes or whatever would be the same situation. You don't want more than the action level in the entire package. When we talked about it before, there's a game to be played with how heavy the gummies are, right? So it was by weight. So that made it's just too confusing to try and break it down that way. The simple way to me is to put 0.3 max package percentage of THC. Super simple.
So, and again, just if you're saying 0.3 percentage, then
Or I'm sorry, milligrams. Yeah, not percentage. Sorry. I think does that not make sense? I mean, anybody else have a thought on that? I think it's pretty clear. That just makes it easy where we don't want any in there. So the maximum amount level should pertain to the package that the customer is getting, whether it's a pack of smokes or it's a pack of candy bars or one candy bar. It'll answer the question for all of it. But I think
Well, the biggest thing is not having unintended consequences of a kid ending up in the ER, which we've had a bit of that in our state's history. So I do have Matt and Courtney that are wanting to jump in on the conversation. Matt?
Yeah, I think we're mixing apples and oranges here. 0.3.
Matt, hold on just a second. You're cutting out a little bit. Can you start over?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we seem to be mixing apples and oranges here with 0.3 is the legal limit at which a product is defined as hemp and federally legal everywhere and legal in most places of the world is a percentage. The 0.3 milligrams of content on a per package is way below the 0.3 that is considered legal hemp and is also non-intoxicating. I would certainly object to it anything being on a container size because, I mean, if you eat a whole bottle of aspirin or Tylenol or any other over-the-counter drug, or, for example, drink a full gallon of milk, you're going to be very sick. To use that as a limitation on this isn't reasonable by any standard. Serving sizes are always defined as a percent of whatever. And if you eat the full package or container of most any product, it's going to make you sick. And this shouldn't be any different.
The only thing that I think to that, though, is when you have products that are made to taste well, you have chocolate packaging, you have gummies, the individual one might not have the impact, but when you eat the whole, yeah, like you said with aspirin, but when you have a kid, they can eat a whole package of gummies that have no intoxicant in it and be just fine and think that they could eat a whole package of gummies, not knowing that they have some level of something in there. And we've had unintended consequences of people being in the ER because they did eat the whole packaging.
Well, maybe it's the type of packaging and the type of marketing. I'm thinking more nearly, capsules or something else as opposed to, gummies. Kid can buy a bottle of aspirin over the counter, and I'm a first responder. We deal with overdoses every once in a while where people intentionally do that, or even accidental, take too much of a medication. But those are all over the counter. You can get at any grocery store. Too much of anything. You can drink too much water and kill you.
So Matt, I got a question for you, and I appreciate the conversation. So thank you very much. I know that when I buy a bottle of aspirin, it has warnings all over it that say, only take this amount, or this is the dosage amount for this age. This is the dosage amount for that age. Gummies with a level of hemp or 0.3% THC, do they say only consume this amount to have this level? Or is it that you can eat the whole, if the labeling doesn't say that, where those other risky items, even if they're over the counter, do have those labeling limits on them? I think that's part of the issue. And when you take them out of the packaging, I don't have a bowl of aspirin sitting around my house, but I have had adults have a bowl of gummies laying around their house, or edibles and this and that. So they're not in their labeled packaging and could be accidentally consumed by somebody.
Maybe we need to address the labeling then.
Yeah, but gummies are also going to necessarily not be just kept in a packaging where aspirin is, yeah, maybe somebody put some aspirin and Ziploc in their purse, but no matter what, somebody sees it, they know that's a pill, they know there's a consequence. There's kind of an education of that where maybe we haven't got to the educating point of this with other products and edibles. I don't know. I want adults to be able to have access to what they want. And I'm one of those people that have argued against banning vaping flavors, because adults have a right to make their decisions. And I have adult friends that use flavored vaping on their tobacco. And yet it's one of those things that also appeals to kids. And we have issues with kids vaping in schools and such like that. So it's kind of one of those things of how do you have the freedom for adults to consume what they are mature and able to make those decisions on their own, versus also protecting from kids getting things unintended. And I think that's, for me as a legislator, the balance I'm trying to find. And how do we get there? Because I don't see kids popping aspirin for fun. And so, or an elementary kid accidentally eating they see gummy bears, I could eat all that. So I'm just throwing that out there for the dialogue to continue. Courtney, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. The frame of this conversation is solely about the minor packaging. Is that correct? Or are we talking about broader product limits? Because those, in my mind, are two very different conversations.
I have taken it to the minor consumption, because ultimately that is a concern for me, but I have also had adults express concern. I've had an adult in my district tell me that they were given a product that said it had CBD and they thought they were fine, and it turned out it wasn't. It was something they were feeling the effects for a bit over a day, and so they were sick over it. It wasn't labeled appropriately. It was an adult who thought they were going to get something chill, and it wasn't. So I guess the question that came up is, like Steven said, you can say it's 0.3 THC, but if you have the whole package, you have somebody consuming a massive amount. Is that the intent, or is it that there's some variations there? So,
well, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think Matt's right. I think this was something that the subcommittee already identified, a month ago. The labeling and packaging piece, we have to address that. I think that is absolutely critical and should go to helping this. I thought we had talked 2 subcommittees ago about the minor piece, and that we all agreed that the 0.5 milligram, which is what was put in place a year ago, was where we were staying with this. And I didn't know that this subcommittee was going to reopen up the OLCC rules that we spent months negotiating last year, which set the product concentration limits. Is that where this conversation is going?
So under what the House Bill 3000 task force and what we're able to do is whether or not rules developed and agreed to something doesn't mean that the legislator stops talking about topics. And quite frankly, the question was, what is there right now? Is it enough? Is it not enough? On all those topics. And there was a summary of what we had briefly talked on last week, or in the last meetings, about minor age. And I don't feel that we actually went far enough in discussing it to come to a conclusion, and I asked for that to be brought back. Because I don't think we actually came to any
And-
consensus.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to having the dialogue. It's just this was not on the agenda, so I'm just trying to make sure that I and the rest of the folks on the task force subcommittee and the folks listening are understanding where the frame of this conversation is going, because I just don't think it's very clear.
That's fair, Courtney, and we can bring it back on an agenda item on another day. I'm totally fine with that. We can do that. So, Courtney, your hand's still up. Brent, okay, Brent, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just was, the biggest problem is that I think unless something's changed that I haven't caught on the current language, there's a loophole by allowing a percentage per gram, for instance. So I don't even know that percentage of THC, if that's, what Matt's saying, I don't know that that's a problem. As long as there's no language changing that to like per gram or per ounce so it doesn't allow it to stack based off how many pieces are in the package. So we need language that's per package, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of why percentage would be bad, and the only way is if it says percentage per package, and it's even the 5 milligram, or, like Courtney was saying, I think that would be fine. But what we need to do is identify no more than that action level in a package. And I don't care if it's percentage or milligrams. And Stephen, you see what I don't think it matters. I think, and as long as it's specific to the package and not to the weight, that's where we're having a problem right now. It was to the weight. And so you could have heavy candies and they could have much more available of THC, and we don't want that. So I think it's just per package, and I think percentage is fine, I guess.
Well, and I want to just bring up, so for me, when this was supposed to be a continued from last meeting, and in the notes from the last meeting is that we had touched on this, and I don't feel that we touched on it. So that was my bad for bringing it back there. Stephen, we'll go to you, and then we'll go back to where we're at.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, percentage is by weight. It's a weight per weight, grams per gram. 0.3% is 3 milligrams per gram. So you can't specify a percent per package, because the numerator and denominator there are both weights. So percent is inherently a scales with the weight of the product.
That's where the problem lies. So then we got to figure, then it has to be in milligrams per package. I don't see how to do it with percentage where it makes sense. Then if it can be stacked by the weight of the product, then that's where the problem is now, where people are getting more than they think they're getting. So I guess I don't know how to solve that percentage language.
In the chat, I went ahead and just posted the adult limits that were set by OLCC and rule. And when we add this to the agenda for the next meeting, I'll go ahead and include what the current limits are for sales to children, and then also include what the sales are currently in rule for sales to adults. Not just links, I'll actually post the language and the table, so that way everybody has it in front of them and can easily look at it for the next meeting.
That works. So, okay. I'm sorry. I kind of took the conversation there when I saw the notes saying that we had kind of come to a conclusion on this, and I don't feel or recall that we did. So I want to make sure that we have that conversation still, and so we'll bring that back. On the agenda from the continued from last meeting, the portions that we talked about is what supply chain should be licensed, starting with secondary product manufacturing in state. Is there an opinion on what levels need to be there? And I guess, Sunny, can you clarify for me before we delve into this? ODAs and rulemaking on some of this stuff. So I guess if you can kind of give us an update of where that is versus what maybe won't be addressed in the rulemaking, or what we still need to address, or maybe you need to give guidelines to or not.
Thank you, Rep. Morgan. Sunny Summers with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We are going to be filing proposed rules next week that would expand the definition of handler, not just from where it is currently for initial processors. So anybody receiving the raw plant material to turn it into something else. We're looking to expand that to include anybody processing anything with cannabinoids in it from hemp. I think it's likely we'll exclude grain and fiber secondary processors. I don't really care if somebody's turning the fiber into a t-shirt so much. But looking at anything for human consumption, using the original definition of human consumption to include inhalation, ingestion, and applications to skin or hair. So that, if those proposed rules go through, that would take effect for the 23 calendar year, because the hemp licenses are based on the calendar year. And so we would start accepting renewals November 1st and then new applications January 1st.
So any product that is derived from hemp with cannabinoids, isn't all hemp got cannabinoids?
No.
Okay,
Your
good to
grain
know.
does not. Your grain, your hemp hearts that you can put in your smoothie or
The
something
eating,
along.
yep. Okay,
Right.
so if it has
things that
cannabinoids
are
and they're
intended,
processing an oil, they're processing any part of the plant or the secondary processing of the plant, you're recommending those come under the regulation of handler.
correct.
Any other thoughts on that based on that information? Does that cover everything that needs to be under the secondary product manufacturing in state? Anybody have comments? Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'll just say that we sat on the Rules Advisory Committee, and this is what we've supported to go through with the ODA rulemaking.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, we heard a presentation yesterday. I'm going to go on to the second one. So let's see what happens with ODA and that rulemaking, if that will cover it. If not, I'm sure we can deal with that first one. We'll leave it there. The second one, though, is importing cannabinoid hemp from out of state. We heard yesterday's California presentation that they basically go after anybody, whether it's produced out of state or in state, for how they that has to come under licensing. So any thoughts on that, on if it's importing cannabinoids? My feelings are that we can't hold our in-state people to a level that we're not holding out of state to. Everybody should be under the same standard. But for importing, is anybody addressing that? Is that being addressed in ODA's import, or is that a hole in the system that they can import from another state and then process it and get it through? Go ahead, Brent.
I was just thinking, listening to where the California team was talking about yesterday, as far as working at the distribution level. I think that is, even though we didn't clearly talk about, that's where the imported products would be from. But it seems if they went through that space, that that would make sense to watch it at that level, as far as watching what's coming in the state versus out. Obviously, we're planning on regulating what's being made here, but as far as what's coming in, I that's basically what he was saying. I think is that they would just be watching it, because it would have to come through a distributor, not necessarily straight to the stores. I don't know. Someone else.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Brent. So what I understood from yesterday was that they're just licensing folks who are selling the concentrates and extracts into the state, not end products. And so the way that ODA is doing the new handling licensing, I believe any of those materials, right, would have to go to a handler in state, and then they would have the license. I'm not against having the out-of-state folks also get a license. I just think, and Sunny, correct me if I'm wrong, but anyone doing the secondary manufacturing, right, they would have to get this new license that we're creating. So that material would go to one of these facilities that are going to have this new license. So maybe both have to get it.
I was thinking final product more than oil and raw, but.
So
Yeah.
having a license for folks selling product into the state.
I don't even know if it's a license as much as, I guess, I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but I was just thinking as far as trying to watch what was coming into the state. My guess is that most companies from out of state are going to have a distribution network. And if there's already oversight over distribution networks, it could potentially include out of state products, which are going to be harder to regulate than what we are seeing currently.
So are you meaning more of a product registration?
Maybe, yeah, maybe that's it instead of a licensing, you know, where you have to have the same. I mean, I don't know if they're them or us or specifically. I mean, we're setting limits around what can be in products. Trying to hold out of state people to that's going to be a huge burdensome plan. But if there was some way for them to register when they were planned on, you know, exporting into Oregon, somehow for that to go through the chain of command, you know, that's not, I mean, trying to have everyone hold a license from out of state. I don't know if that's the answer as much as just registering their products, maybe.
So would that go with the labeling and packaging piece, right? If we're going to put authority for any products being sold in the state have to have certain labeling and packaging and have that approval, wouldn't that somehow tie in? And, you know, Stephen or Amanda, if you have thoughts on that, or Sunny, I'd be curious.
I think it would be a good idea, but.
I think it's two separate things. I think, and Andre, I was going to actually come to you soon to get your perspective on the yesterday too, but for me, having labeling and having packaging labeled appropriately is an integrity piece. It's one issue, but in Oregon, we have a standard on how things are grown, what pesticides are used, how the product's handled, everything else like that. How do we know what's being imported and then processed and sold on the counters is the same? But Andre, go ahead.
Can I just say one thing real fast? I was just saying that if we're going to require labeling and packaging approvals, wouldn't that be able to tie in a product type registration with that if each product is going to have that label review? And I'm just brainstorming here, but yeah, Andre, go ahead.
I mean, I was just gonna. My opinion is that I think that the labeling and packaging requirements are probably your most effective without being completely burdensome to both the agency and whatever business is importing product. And then you have to craft rules around, well, are there penalties and violations for mislabeling or adulterating the product? So similar to, you know, what the FDA does at a federal level, you know, regardless if it's with a drug or a supplement. And then you have to have a mechanism for like validating the label, right? So you got to be able to pull product off the shelf, test it, and then if it's not, if it's mislabeled, then you go back to that company and you say, okay, well, you violated Oregon's labeling laws, and here's your fine or penalty. I think you also need to include some kind of requirements for traceability and record keeping, where it's not necessarily the state's duty to do that trace back, or I mean for the traceability and record keeping, but it's the company's responsibility. And if they can't do that, then of course they lose privileges to maybe sell into the state or something like that. So you kind of put the onus on the company to say, okay, you have to be labeled correctly and it has to meet the legal requirements for the product, the end product. And then if something happens, you have to have appropriate records where we can trace it back to the source and find whatever the issue is. So it's not a perfect system, but I think it's less burdensome and expensive than an outright licensing system.
Stephen Crowley.
So I know we haven't talked about exactly what the labeling program would look like, but one thing to keep in mind, at least in terms of marijuana labeling, is not every product needs an approved label. There's also provisions for generic labels that comply with the rules. And so products with a generic label, there wouldn't be any record if hemp labeling followed a similar path. The other thing that I just wanted to call attention to, Andre was talking about adulteration, and I think for adulteration of foods and food type products, that's probably pretty clear already, but making sure that there is some mechanism to address adulteration in the context of vape products, that piece I'm not sure exists.
I
Brent?
think from a health perspective, the vape products is probably the product of most concern.
So Andre, can you expand on that before I go to Brent? How?
Well, I mean, it's just the
Any
nature of the
suggestions on what
product.
to do?
The nature of the product, you're inhaling it. So like if you're inhaling some kind of adulterant that's harmful to health, whether it's like a heavy metal or some kind of solvent, like that's going to be much more of a concerning public health issue. And maybe, I mean, food, like if there's just kind of the mechanism of getting a toxin out of your body, like inhaling it into your lungs is much more dangerous than, it being processed through your GI system. And I mean, the danger with food type products is of course like potency. Like if there's too much THC in a product and a child gets a hold of it, then it could have some pretty bad consequences for the child. But as far as like chemicals, your body, you kind of have to eat a lot of it, depending on the chemical, right? Like you're not really going to experience a lot of acute problems unless it's contaminated with some kind of bacteria or, E. coli or something, or salmonella or something like that. But that's that's a different issue. That's kind of a manufacturing control issue than, allowing products that have, like vape products that have, whatever, vitamin E or whatever solvent that we've recently banned.
Brent?
Yeah, I would just say to Stephen's point, or sorry, Andre's point, that of course cartridges, there's a huge concerns with products in vape carts. We understand that, but overall, I think it wouldn't be fair to establish a set of rules for hemp in particular, or cannabis, but hemp product manufacturers in Oregon to have specific label controls and oversight, and not ask that of anyone trying to ship those similar products into the state. I think it's giving Oregon product manufacturers, have guidelines that have to be followed, and it'd be unfair to allow anyone to ship whatever crap they want into the state. And what's stopping a hemp provider from using California's model and sending their oil down there and having gummies made with something they shouldn't, or a cart or whatever, and then shipping it in through the export channel, because it would be a back channel essentially. So I think we have to somehow keep an eye on products coming into the state. A product registry makes the most sense without having them have to be in a licensing system. I think that's going to be overly burdensome, but certainly the product registry and oversight at the wholesale level, ideally, where we could pull products versus, I think that's what made a lot of sense yesterday, is they weren't, from California, wasn't talking about trying to go to the minute markets and pulling products. That's going to be a lot of work because there's so many. It's not a few hundred dispensaries. We're talking about minute markets, grocery stores, health food stores. Like, it would be impossible to go and pull samples from there. So I think the wholesale level makes sense on that.
Amanda Metzler.
Thank you, Rep. Morgan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did they say yesterday for California that they have a registration for those who are selling end products like the Minute Marts, and that those stores had to have a registration? I thought that's what I heard him say.
I thought everybody was tracked, but
That's
I could be
what I
wrong.
thought too. Well, I thought that as well, and I thought that maybe the having those who are going to be selling hemp products, just like those who sell tobacco, have a registration to say that those are products that are going to be sold in their stores. I would advocate for having that as an additional, it wouldn't be a license, obviously, a registration to say that those are products we're going to be selling in our store.
So I have a question. I mean, so if we have a registry, would it be the retailer's responsibility to register, or would it be the importer's responsibility to register? I think you're on mute, Brett, but I can read your lips.
Yes, no, the product manufacturer. I think it would be too much to ask the minute market to go through that. Just, you may get a lot of people that don't want to buy products because they don't want the hassle, you know. But certainly the manufacturer, is worth it for them to do it so they can sell their product in the state of Oregon. Super simple.
All right, so I'm gonna look back at the list. So we talked about secondary product manufacturing in state being dealt with through ODA rules. We brought up the importing cannabinoid hemp from out of state. To me, that's still kind of the unfinished product. On the list is still wholesale distribution of cannabinoid hemp. And then also the retail, whether in-state business or out of business. So we've kind of touched on a couple of those. Importing cannabinoid hemp from out of state. If you are an in-state licensee, you have, under the ODA's recommended rules, you would have some kind of regulation. Are there any recommendations for I guess my question is, how do you know if they actually made to a licensed process or manufacturer? Unless at retail level, or there is some level of, like you said, a product registration. I'm not sure what it is, because I'm really not wanting over regulation. I'm just kind of, it's like, how do you find this balance, right? But okay, so ODA is recommending that secondary processors get licensed under handler licenses, but somebody's importing something and they're going to make a product and they're going to sell it to a store, and a store's going to sell it to us. If the whole process came from out of state, how would we even know? Or how do you know that who was the manufacturer, handler, or whatever was licensed or not, if there's not something for the end product? Brent?
Well, I think we're answering what you're asking, but I think anything that comes into the state, whether it's a wholesaler in state that's bringing in an out of state product, that finished product, is that what you're talking about? Someone's bringing a product in here, or are you talking about someone bringing oil in and making a product with that oil?
Bringing oil in, making a product.
Well, at that point, they still have to go through the testing and packaging rules of the state for them to even put it to market. So I think that would be covered by anything here. So if you're making it here, you have to follow all those rules now. So I don't think that's as much of a concern as I do agree. It's going to be difficult for out of state products that are coming here have to register their product to sell in the state, and they have to be compliant with labels. That would be great. But following up on, are they a real company? Do they have, depending on the state it's coming from and what their particular rules are, I think that would be overly burdensome for anyone here to try and make sure they're a legit company. That's going to be like way beyond what we can handle, unfortunately. That way
Yeah, I do agree with Brent. I think it's going to be very hard to manage, but I just want to follow up. California said yesterday really clearly they do not track any products, and I just put the FAQ from CDPH in the chat. They do not license any of the retail stores. They only license the producers and manufacturers. So they have a different tier structure of licenses for extract producers, human food manufacturers, pet food manufacturers, and cosmetic manufacturers. So that's the framework that they have.
did it mention State products, Courtney?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Out of state products, did you see something as far as, I mean, that's in-state making products, right? So how are they, as far as someone making it and bringing it in?
I think this applies across the board, whether it's in-state or out of state, right? Because they said it's those
No,
extracts.
because they said they were going to go out of state and visit other places that are making it. Remember?
I just meant for the fee structure of the extract producers, because they said it was the extracts and concentrates. They're the only folks that they're licensing, or yeah, that requiring licensing from out of state.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, so Amanda Borup, looking at the question of, is there a change in state law needed for the regulation of intoxicating cannabis-derived products related to importing cannabinoid hemp from out of state? Do we feel like we have an answer to that one?
I mean, to me, it sounds like there's a lot of people that are thinking that a product registry hand in hand with labeling requirements and packaging requirements might be something that we're interested in looking further into. And I do think yesterday when California was giving the presentation, they were talking about requiring a license if you're importing an extract or a concentrate. I believe they said that they required certain labeling for all CBD products or hemp-based products in the state. And he mentioned something about a QR code as being able to attach that to the testing results, if I'm remembering correctly.
I
Yeah,
think so.
a few different states have the QR code